Lord Herbert once said, "He that cannot forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself, for every man has need to be forgiven." Hello and welcome to today's Heartlift with Janelle. I'm Janelle and so excited that you have found your way right here. It's always amazing, isn't it, when we happen upon a podcast and we think, this is exactly what I needed today. And I hope that's how you will feel after today's message. We're celebrating 4th of July here, Independence Day in the States, a day where many of us have cookouts and do lots of fun things, have parades. But it's also a day where we should take a moment, that's a good should, to think about our freedom and how blessed we are to live in a country that truly gives us freedom. And I believe at the core of freedom is a practice of forgiveness. And so today we're going to hone in on becoming a forgiving person, where forgiveness is always in the forefront of our heart, our mind, our soul, and our being. Because if we move through our days with a stance, with a posture, with a mindset of forgiveness, our lives truly will be more meaningful. We will have that eudaimonia I talk about in Stronger Every Day, 9 Tools for an Emotionally Healthy You. We want a life that is filled with pursuing meaningfulness, not just an empty pursuit. And so forgiveness, this practice of forgiveness, will really help us and serve us in such a beautiful way, like Lord Herbert said. I will repeat his words again. They are so powerful. He that cannot forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself. For every man has need to be forgiven. So I'm going to reach back into the archives today from season 1, episodes 2 and 3, and just go back and listen again and learn again what it truly means to forgive and what it means to forget. Here we go. So today's word, are you ready? It has come quite honestly. I had another word prepared for today, but so many of my clients over the past few weeks have been dealing with this word. It tends to be a huge boulder that impedes our movement forward. Forgive. Oh, such a loaded word, isn't it? Volumes and volumes have been written about this word forgive, yet it seems such a hard thing to do, especially when it comes to forgiving ourselves. So we really want to make sure that we get to the bottom of what this word means to us and how we can practice not only forgiving others, but forgiving ourselves. Really hard to do. In his book, Forgive for Good, A Proven Prescription for Health and Happiness, Dr. Fred Luskin gives us many, many powerful principles to practice. But we first want to look at the word forgive. It's a verb, and forgive comes from the Latin root remitto, R-E-M-I-T-T-O, which generally means to pass or transfer. That is to send or to throw. Let's go one step deeper into the words within the word forgive, and let's understand what remit means. Also a verb, it means to send, to relax as in intensity. So to make something less intense or violent in order to be able to pass or transfer into the next phase. And I love that the prefix for actually means before. So forgive would mean before we can give to others or to ourselves or to God, we have to be able to move or transfer any violent, tense, negative, unhealthy emotions that might be living inside of our heart. It's a mystery. There's really no way I can go, okay, if you do 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to be able to forgive yourself, and then you're going to be able to forgive everybody in your life who has harmed you or been hurtful to you or who has abandoned you or perhaps who has violated you. We cannot do that. We cannot forgive. That's what forgive means, remember, is to transfer or pass, to relax the intensity of that negative emotion into God's hands. We can't do that on our own. There's no possible way I can do that on my own. I'm not sure where you are in your faith life, where you are in your belief system. I just know that I can't. I lived 21 years, somewhat. I definitely I believed in God. I knew God was there. But until I became 21 and truly became an ardent follower and a reader and a listener and doing the best I could to make the ways of Jesus my own, I couldn't not have transferred or passed that intense emotion of hate that I had for my father on to God so that he could give me his love. It's a beautiful divine exchange. That's what I like to call it. So right now, I just wonder, is there someone in your life right now as we're talking? Is there a person? Is it a mother? Perhaps it's your dad. Perhaps it's a sister or a brother. Maybe it's a bully in your school. Maybe it's a bully in your youth group or in your church. Maybe it's the church community as a whole. And so is that person. I just want you to kind of keep that person in the forefront of your mind as I read a couple things to you. Let me find in Dr. Luskin's book. He writes of this beautiful science of forgiveness. He uses the words of Frederick Buechner, who is a beautiful intellectual scholar and Christ follower and deeply spiritual reformer. Of the 7 deadly sins, anger is possibly the most fun. Listen up. To lick your wounds, to smack your lips over grievances long past, to roll over your tongue the prospect of bitter confrontations still to come, to savor to the last toothsome morsel both the pain you are given and the pain you are giving back. In many ways, it is a feast fit for a king. The chief drawback is what you are wolfing down is yourself. The skeleton at the feast is you. We have been told over and over again, the only person we're hurting by not forgiving is ourselves, especially when we won't let ourselves off the hook for being human, for making mistakes, for having regrets. Dr. Luskin writes, scientific research clearly shows that learning to forgive is good for one's health and well-being, good for mental health, and according to recent data, good for physical health as well. A number of conclusive scientific studies attest to the healing power of forgiveness. A handful of specific forgiveness studies show that becoming more and more forgiving enhances one's health. Preliminary studies from research in allied fields like psychology, medicine, and religion show that feeling more positive emotions such as gratitude, faith, and caring have a positive impact. Are you ready for this? On cardiovascular functioning. That's your heart. So science even proves to us that above all else, if you take care of your heart and the 34,000 emotions that live inside of your heart and soul, you are going to improve your life and actually increase your longevity. And I'm going to add, you're going to become a radiant presence in the sphere, your sphere of influence. So both kinds of studies suggest positive results in one's life as one learns how to forgive. Other studies show that people who evidence higher degrees of blame, okay, here's the other side of the coin, because we have to talk about it, suffer more from a variety of illnesses. You will remember that blame is at the core of holding a grudge. Ooh. Blaming others emerges as the result of an inability to manage anger and hurt. Medical and psychological studies have shown for years that anger and hostility are harmful to cardiovascular health. We see that speaking healing words and moving in the realm of grace instead of shame enables us to practice self-forgiveness and the forgiveness of others. These studies about blaming and shaming also show that people who have difficulty managing anger have higher rates of heart disease and they suffer more heart attacks. Oh my gosh, that's just amazing. So in another fabulous book called Moving Forward, 6 Steps to Forgiving Yourself and Breaking Free from the Past, one of my absolute favorite counseling professors and writers, Everett L. Worthington Jr., he offers a 6-step program to learning to forgive yourself. Step 1, receive God's forgiveness. We've talked about that a little, and that comes by receiving God's grace, basking, just saying, God, I can't stop hating my father. I can't do it on my own. Will you please help me transfer past this intense emotion? That means forgive. Help me pass and transfer this intensely negative emotion of hate onto your big shoulders. And instead, will you bring me the capacity and the possibilities and the ability to love? Oh, my friend, he will do this for you. He did it for me. He's done it several times. Step 2 is repair relationships. We'll talk about that later in another podcast. Step 3, rethink ruminations. A rumination is like a cow has 5 stomachs. And so all day long as they're eating, they have 5 storehouses of grass and food, and they just upchuck it, throw it up into their mouth and chew it again. And then they bring it back down, they bring it back up, they bring it back down, they bring it back up. So how many times does our those unhealthy, negative, intense emotions of hate or grudges or fill in the blank, selfishness, how many times a day do we bring that back up, especially if we hear a person's name or we remember a bad memory? Step 4, reach emotional self-forgiveness. Step 5 is rebuild self-acceptance. And step 6 is resolve to live victoriously. Oh, Heartlifter, it was so good to revisit that very strong teaching and those beautiful words from Everett Worthington and Dr. Fred Luskin. And so I want to close today with the 4 stages of becoming a forgiving person, since we're looking at how can we begin to have this practice of forgiveness in our lives where we can actually be known as, wow, a really forgiving person. And what are the benefits of that? Well, Dr. Luskin, in chapter 14 of his book, Forgive for Good, A Proven Prescription for Health and Happiness, he says, because we can choose to forgive, we have a choice also about whether or not to take offense in the first place. Wow, that's what I really want to bring home today. Because we can choose to forgive, we also have a choice about whether or not to take the offense in the first place. He writes, my understanding of forgiveness suggests the radical notion, and this is radical, that life would improve if we rarely or never use the power of choice to take the offense in the first place. I write a lot about this in my own healing recovery in Overcoming Hurtful Words, Rewrite Your Own Story. I will put the link to that book. I was thinking this week a lot because I'm working on a new book and it's just been so powerful to be back down into the research tunnel and really just immersing myself in a subject that is so powerful. And I thought to myself, most authors, if you ask them, they will tell you the books that they write, whether they're fiction, nonfiction, whatever genre, are typically because they need it themselves. Well, it's certainly true in my own life. I wrote Rock Solid Families, my first book, because I was in the midst of parenting and I just had been parented in an alcoholic home and I just didn't know quite how to do it. So I researched and studied and developed these foundational stones that I thought were important for a really good home. And then my second book, Overcoming Hurtful Words, boy, I needed it. I had really been slayed by somebody's hurtful words, but the truth of that, the journey of overcoming hurtful words showed me that it was my problem. It wasn't anyone else's problem but my own. I needed to change in the truest sense of the word metanoia. I needed a complete and total change of heart. I needed to be healed. I needed trauma-informed healing. And I have done that work for a decade. And that led me to so much more understanding about why I let people do what they did to me, why I let people speak the way they spoke to me, or why I let other people think for me. I had no autonomy. And so, Dr. Luskin's right. We have a choice whether or not to take the offense. We have a choice. And it is a radical choice that will change your life. It has changed my own. And that led me to write the 9 tools that I thought if I had known these 9 tools that I wrote in Stronger Every Day, then maybe I would have never needed to even write the second book. So it's just been such a phenomenal journey. He continues, since we have choice, wouldn't it make sense to limit the amount of times we are hurt or offended? I really, really want you to be thinking about this. In Overcoming, I do give that choice to choose or not to choose. It's a whole practice. And it's like, when do we decide to just let somebody's hurt towards us just roll off our back like water off a duck's back? When do we do that? Well, I'm going to let you find that out in previous episodes or in Overcoming Hurtful Words. There's a beautiful guide that goes with it. And when do we hold someone accountable? It's a slippery slope, and it does take practice. He continues, when you have practiced forgiveness on a couple of hurtful situations, that's the key, you soon find that you have become a more forgiving person. And I will add once again, because part of the journey, when you're taking on people's offensive, right? When they're coming at you, when they're saying something hurtful or mean or giving you some nonverbals that are, if you're operating from an unhealthy sense of self and you have unhealthy communication patterns and behavior patterns in your life, and if those are based in any form of shame, it's going to be really hard to let go of an offense. So you see, this is like the hand and the glove. They go together. Our work on our own hearts has to be going on alongside of our capacity of forgiveness to be enlarged in our lives. It all goes together. It's very hard to forgive if you have a heart that is filled with shame-based thoughts or an incapacity because you were never taught any of these things. Some of us are at a deficit. He continues, you may notice you are less inclined to get angry or that you feel more patient with people. Forgiveness, the ability to live life without taking offense, without giving blame when hurt, and by telling stories that reflect peace and understanding, is a choice that can be practiced in a host of situations. Forgiveness, while not the only choice, is a skillful way to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So he gives these 4 stages of becoming a forgiving person. I'm just going to give them to you very quickly. He says, one way of thinking about this is to compare forgiveness to the process of tuning in a radio to a favorite station. To make this analogy work, you have to imagine an analog and not a digital dial on the radio. The first step one takes to tune the radio is to find a particular station out of the static. You know, on an analog radio, you have static, 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 and then all of a sudden a crystal clear signal comes in and you have a station. You may get the station you want at first by accident. Maybe you were going through all the stations on the dial and heard a snippet of a song you liked. Finding that station again can be hard if the signal is not strong. This is a beautiful metaphor. To find the particular station you want, you have to go back to where you heard the music you liked and adjust your dial. Adjust your dial. At first, the station may be hard to distinguish, but with practice, you can find it. It may take some time for fine tuning, but when you are certain you have the proper station, you leave the dial set. This station then becomes the one you hear when you turn on your radio. And in most of our cars, there's that little trick you can do. You hold the button down and it clicks you on that station so you can just return to it all the time. We know that starting with this station does not stop us from finding other stations. There will be times when the music is better, higher up on the dial. We will have times when we are in the mood for something different. Learning to forgive. Here's your lean-in moment for today. Learning to forgive is like fine-tuning the forgiveness station on the radio. Or could we even say, learning to forgive, Dr. Luskin, I'm going to make a change here. Learning to forgive is like fine-tuning the forgiveness station in our brain, in our mind. Rewiring, right? We do a lot of rewiring of our neural pathways here in our community. As you fine-tune the forgiveness channel, less and less static and interference get in the way. This is really good. Yet, as with your favorite radio station, you are not forced to listen to forgiveness when you wish to change the channel. Once you have tuned into forgiveness, you can find it again when you need it. If you do not tune forgiveness in, you cannot know what it feels like. That's it right there. So many of us are stuck, right, in the static of our anger, our rage. We're stuck in the patterns of blaming and shaming everybody else in the world for our problems. Man, that is where I was when I was in my own process back in writing Overcoming Hurtful Words. I was stuck in the static of so many limiting beliefs and so many things that were holding me hostage. But once I fine-tuned my heart's radio and practiced it on a daily basis, I couldn't go back. If you do not tune forgiveness in, like I said, you cannot know what it feels like. If you do not tune forgiveness in, you cannot make a good choice on whether or not to choose it again in the future. Wow. So powerful. So I'll go through these stages quickly. In the first stage of becoming a forgiving person, people experience a loss in their life, feel angry or hurt, and tend to justify their negative emotions. Oh yeah. At this stage of forgiveness, you're filled with self-justified anger or hurt. At some point in your life, you were wounded and you still feel mad at or hurt by the person who wronged you. You blame the person committing the wrong for how you are feeling. It is their action and not your choice of response that you determine to be the cause of your distress. You have forgotten that you have choices about how you can react, or you are so wounded that you are convinced that it would not be right to forgive the offense. At the first stage, there is usually both active and submerged anger, as well as a great deal of pain. And Dr. Luskin does not go into it in this book about trauma or childhood trauma. But as you know, in this community, we are trauma informed. And so there are several episodes that will help you. Sometimes we need to have the sensory work to help heal our subconscious wounds. And I will link some of those important episodes in the show notes. The second stage emerges when, after feeling upset with someone for a while, we realize that our hurt and anger do not feel good. Okay, so in stage one, we're angry as you know what. and we're blaming other people. We're not rational. We are reacting, exploding, putting our hand through the wall, or repressing it to the place where it's hurting our bodies desperately. So the second stage is when the anger starts to not feel good anymore. Or maybe you don't feel good anymore because your body is keeping that really angry score. We become concerned about our emotional balance as well as our physical health. We begin to see the consequences of our grievance on our happiness and well-being. Yeah, it has an effect. Depression, headaches, incapacity to sleep, short fuse, all kinds of medical problems. Some, after feeling upset for a while, begin to think about how to repair the damage to the relationship. Others simply decide they've thought about a past grievance enough and it's time to move on. Whatever the motivation at the second stage, we take steps to lessen the impact the grievance has on our life and relationships. We may try to see the problem from the other person's point of view, or we can decide to minimize the problem by saying it was no big deal. Another strategy is to look for a way to soothe our upset feelings. In any case, after an extended period, the offended person is no longer actively aggrieved. At this stage, we tell our friends that we've let go of much of the hurt and anger toward the person who hurt us. In this second stage of forgiveness, we notice that our bad feelings are not helping us. So we take steps to see things differently. So critical. Maybe you are in this step. Reach out for help. In the third stage of becoming a forgiving person, we remember how good it felt the last time we were able to forgive. So good. In the third stage, we remember how good it felt the last time we were able to forgive. That's where your fine-tuning practice is coming into play, isn't it? We challenge our unenforceable rules on the spot. We do this so that the problem does not rent a lot of space in our mind. The third stage comes after we have seen the results of forgiveness in action, and we choose to let go of a new interpersonal grievance quickly. In the third stage, when we are offended, we deliberately choose to feel the hurt for a shorter period. We have learned that the negative feeling will pass. We turn our attention, and this is key, either to repairing the relationship if it needs it, right? Or to letting go of seeing the situation as a problem. We learn to rent not the grievance space, but the solution space. Oh, I have to say that again. We learn to rent not the grievance space, but the solution space. In a neuroscience way, we're now more in our prefrontal cortex where reason and rationality reside. We're coming out of our limbic system where we're fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we are now moving into a rational way of thinking. Because we have let go of grievances, we have gotten help, we have talked about it, we've taken lots of deep breaths and done our grounding work, right? So good. In the third stage, we are more in control. We are aware that the length of time we experience a situation as a grievance is primarily up to us. Please lean in here, Heartlifters. This is life-changing. I'll close with the fourth stage. It is the most difficult and possibly yet the most powerful. At this stage, you simply become a forgiving person. Simply. This stage comes as you make the decision to forgive first and let many troubling things go. Once you have tasted this way of moving through your day, your life will be so much better. I promise. This comes with a promise. As a forgiving person, you become resistant to taking offense. Your skin becomes a little tougher. You take less personal offense. You're convinced that you are responsible for how you feel, and you tell stories that show you and other people in the light of your positive intention. The fourth stage of forgiveness involves the choice to rarely, if ever, take offense. This does not mean that we condone unkindness. It does not mean that we become a doormat. Are you hearing me here? This is very important. It means we save being upset only for situations where getting upset helps us. There is a time. Ecclesiastes is so clear. There's a time for love. There is a time for hate. There is a time for peace. There is a time for war. Sometimes we are to draw upon our healthy assertiveness, to speak our mind with love, to share our opinions, to call someone to accountability. There are times for that. But there are also times where we just have to let it go. We do not take hurtful actions so personally, and we do not blame the offender for how we are feeling. At this stage, we understand that people are not perfect and that we can expect them to hurt us at times. Stage 4 usually emerges at the same time as some or all of the following ways of thinking about offenses. So I'm going to read a few. The fourth stage usually emerges when we think in these following ways. I want to waste as little of my life as possible in the discomfort caused by anger or hurt. I want to react well when things do not go the way I want. This decision allows me to forgive myself, forgive others, and even forgive life itself when necessary. Life comes with positive and unpleasant experiences, right? We hold joy and sorrow at the same time in our heart-lifting practice. We learn to live from an integrated, wholehearted place. Dealing with life is a challenge. We want to be thrivers, not victims. And I know it hurts when people do not forgive me. I do not want to hurt others in this way, so I will perceive the problem in a way that I can either deal with it successfully or let it go. Life is filled with beauty and incredible marvels. I am missing these experiences if I am stuck in the static of old hurts or wounds. I forgive myself for getting sidetracked. I'm going to close here. People do the best they can. But in this community, we also say when we learn better, we do better. Right? It's not, oh, he's doing the best he can. She's doing the best they can. Okay, well, maybe that's true today. But a true Heartlifter is committed to transformation and committed to learning every day how to become a better, more wholehearted person. Sometimes when people err, the best way to help them is offering understanding. The first step in this process is to forgive whatever constituted this specific offense. And finally, to remember, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Why do I expect everyone to be? This is a lot. I know it was. But this week is all about freedom. And I believe at the core of freedom is a practice of forgiveness. And as we practice forgiveness, we will become a forgiving person. And as a result, our lives, our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and everyone in our spheres of influence will be so grateful.
Thanks for listening today. It was great having you here. For even more great content and resources, please join the Stronger Everyday online community at JanelleRaridan.com. Always remember, you, my friend, have value, worth, and dignity.